It's awesome having you on, and I appreciate you taking your time and spending it with us. This is our December 22nd video call. Obviously, we got, yeah, awesome. So some of this is 201 course. I've got some of those slides into this just so that way everybody's on the same page. I got some of those slides into this as well. We've got our periodization plan, and I want to kind of touch base with you guys and see where you guys are at. But we've got different types of learners. Obviously, you got visual learners, you got auditory learners, and kinesthetic learners. All of us are a little bit different. I'm probably more of a kinesthetic learner, but I definitely, the more that you see and the more that you do, the more that you're going to retain. So there's different definitions of coach, and there's several varieties here. But basically, a coach's job, and by definition, is to get you from one place to another. And I hope we've got several athletes on here as well. And I hope several athletes get this call because athletes are their own best coach. And that's what we're striving to do. When you become to an elite status or a high performance athlete, you should be your own best coach. You should know what you need, and you should know which coaches are going to help you get to that prospect and get to that potential the most efficiently. And so these are, you go back to, the 1800s, 1900s, early 1900s, the stagecoach, then obviously you got the motor coach, but at the same point in time, we were talking about the physical coach. When we're looking at pathways for coaches, obviously the 201 course, if you have not taken it and you are a high performance athlete, I encourage you to take the 201 course. There's no reason not to, in my mind whatsoever. And at the same point in time, if you're a coach and you haven't taken the 201 course, there are several slides in this presentation and last month's presentation. I will share all of those with you. But this gets us going towards the 202. Obviously, having a goal, the more that we can get in here, if we can get 500 wrestling coaches in Australia, that would be awesome. And it would help us moving forward. At the same point in time, registered coach, you got to go through this course to obtain the certification by 2024. So that kind of puts a little timeline. What is coaching? And I hit on this briefly. Coaches development. It's an ongoing process that involves education, mentoring, reflective practice, practical experience, all of those things, but it's self-development, right? And that's exactly what I'm trying to do. And that's what I'm getting through this. I'm learning from you guys every time, and I'm going to continue to learn tonight. And I can't wait. But at the bottom left of this, you see that I put on there, be your own best coach. And that's for coaches and athletes. Be your own best coach. What's your weaknesses? What do you need to make your strengths, right? If it's a weakness, let's make it a strength. You'll see in this arrow going up from bottom left to top right, you'll see that there's the yellow plan goes to implement. So we got to come up with a plan. We're going to talk about our plan a little bit, then implement it. That's what should have been going on from last call to this call. And now we're going to review just a hair bit. Review it, then we adjust, and then we continue to grow and we replan once we make that adjustment process. There's a group committee that's came together and a group that's worked with this, but that is what coaching is, getting us from point A to point B. Some of the essential coaching skills, this is in that 201 course again. I think number 7 is huge right here, and that's interpersonal skills. You got to build the relationships. You got to be able to resolve conflicts. We're not all going to agree on certain things and certain aspects, especially between the coach and the athlete. The athlete might feel strongly one way and the coach might feel another way, but you got to work, together collaboratively. And then obviously you got to be organized. So you go back up to 6, you got to be organized. The technical knowledge, number 1, and those things, tactical knowledge, all of those things are definitely essential keys in wrestling. But I think definitely 7 and 6 right here for this project, and for this meeting, that's vitally important. So now I'm going to turn it kind of over to you guys a little bit. How's it going right now? Last month, we talked about the periodization plan. We talked about this at different levels from the development. We also talked about the high performance athletes. Right now, as you can see on this, hopefully you can still see my screen, but you see that we are in the 3rd week in December. So you've got the gray tab up at top. It says December. Down the next block is week number 3, 17th through the 23rd. And then you see highlighted in kind of that off blue is your individual training plan. These are things that are done at home. We are still in the conditioning cycle. So we're in our base phase where we need to be hitting a high volume, low intensity. We're talking 80% volume, 20% intensity. We talked about that. Competition isn't really relevant right now. Competition isn't really relevant right now. But our goals are definitely right now to develop the aerobic cardio endurance, the anaerobic muscular power, right? We're starting to create our match plan. What's the techniques and tactics that we're going to use? And this is our largest volume of training. So right now, not a whole lot of intensity, but a ton of reps should be going on. So if you guys want to kind of take turns, unmute, just tell me, how are you feeling with this plan? How are you working with this plan? What is this looking like from your perspective, whether you're the coach, you're the athlete, or if you're kind of overseeing it? Like I know, Andre, we'll kind of start with you if you want. How are things going that way from the athletes that you've been interacting with? What are your thoughts on the current training volume and intensity? Let's start with that.
Yeah, Marty, thanks for passing me the mic. Yeah, we are working with athletes individually. Because I don't have an opportunity to talk with everyone. I mean, like see everyone, but I talk to them on the phone. I had an opportunity to provide general directions of the training process prior to the Oceania Championships, and yeah, that's the idea. Athletes feel good about the plan, and they feel really comfortable with that.
Awesome. Any other coaches want to hop on and talk about your thoughts on the coaching side of things? Okay. Are there any recent changes in anybody's match plan that you've seen? Coach, has there been anybody that's talked about maybe a different technique or a different the performance that's been going on in a practice room, or maybe you've noticed being in a room with somebody or talking with them on the phone where their performance maybe has changed, or their match plan, they've thought about things and, hey, wait a minute, maybe I don't go to a 2-on-1, maybe I go to an underhook, or is there a certain strategy that we're trying to pursue here?
I think now it's all about what's actually reading in the chart. It's about more repetitions, more reps, more stuff. Like athletes are working on development of their own skills. That's what I wanted to say. And yeah, that's basically it. Like we are following the plan.
Awesome. Hey, have you started hitting like more 2-on-1s? Or are you just kind of hitting a variety of moves, technical aspects, or are you just hitting a ton of volume on all of them? Or are you just trying to concentrate on one or two for each individual, or how's that looking?
It really depends on the athlete, because every athlete has different needs and different technical. They have their own technical strategy, and like at this moment, we're trying to identify those technical aspects that they will be using during the competitions, and yeah, that's basically it.
Perfect. So yeah, so we're still trying to come up with that match plan. We're still trying to come up with what's their tactic and what's their strategy. So that's great. And I'm just kind of making some notes here as well, because that's huge, right? That's a big piece of it. So and this kind of goes in. So now as coaches, have you started? So now they're coming up with their strategies and their weaknesses and their strengths, and kind of going through that. And obviously, you've seen that. Have you started incorporating like specific drills, or have you talked to other coaches, maybe to Alan or Mosin or any of the other coaches that have been on? Have you reached out to them, or have they reached out to you and said, hey, like this is definitely a strength. Maybe we didn't see that at first, or maybe we did, or maybe we need to hit this more of? Like, is there something that we need to be hitting more of as a country or as an individual?
No, it didn't really happen. We talk with coaches consistently, but we actually didn't talk about this.
Okay.
But
Okay.
we should start talking about this. I think at the beginning of January, we have a training camp starts, as you know, like on January 8th. Hopefully,
Yep.
we will get all coaches together, and we will talk about the technical aspects and yeah, stuff related to
Yeah.
this.
Yeah, I think because that's a big piece of this periodization plan, right? Like we need to talk about, like, if James is a high crotch, then we need to start working on getting him these high reps in that high crotch, right? because that's definitely going to be one of his strengths. Or if it's his, a sweep single or an outside single, then that's it. At the same time, we also need to talk about those weaknesses, whether it's giving up a high crotch or giving up a sweep single or giving up a double or whatever those cases are. We talked about certain athletes that their parterre defense is a weakness of theirs, and we need to work on that. And so that's one of those things like, okay, how do we make that weakness a strength? And this is definitely a phase where we can hit that. At the same time, are there any recovery strategies that any of the coaches or athletes have talked about that they found that are really, really beneficial, and they that they've utilized, that, hey, we're hitting this high volume and I'm really sore and I'm tender because we're hitting a ton of volume, but I've also found that if I'm doing this stretch or this, whether it's a cold plunge or a sauna or whatever, that it's healing. Have we had any discussions with that stuff yet?
Marty, no discussion at this point. It would be highly appreciated if you can provide some general guidelines about the recovery sessions during this video call. And I just wanted to point out that we definitely struggle with parterre defense, as you could see during the camp in November. And this is something that we want to put focus on during the January camp. Especially gut wrench defenses. And if you can cover the topic related to recovery during different phases of training plan periodization, like base phase, pre-competition, because as you know, like we have pretty much slightly more than 1 month left until we have Oceania Championships. So we need to make sure that our athletes are in a proper shape and not overtrained. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, definitely. And so I've got all that built in here. A lot of this is built in here, so that's great. I just kind of wanted to see where everybody was at. Obviously, hydration is a huge key of this, and that also comes into weight loss and weight management and all of those things as well. So it's not necessarily weight cutting, but it's about managing your weight. And so right now at this, we should be hitting high volume, low intensity. So as far as recovery phase in this, it's more active recovery. So you should be hitting morning walks, a light morning run, and that's going to get the lactic acid getting going and spreading out throughout the body. The lactic acid is going to recover the muscles, obviously. The more that you're stretching those out, getting in a light run, getting the heart rate up, just a hair. It's not a dire sprint. We're not going for a 2-mile test, anything like that. Just a quick 10, 15-minute jog of a morning, waking up, getting the body going, take a quick 8 to 16 ounces of water, and then take off for a nice little light jog where you can still talk while you're running. That's going to help right now in this phase in the conditioning cycle with some of the muscle fatigue, some of the recovery, some of the muscle recovery, those things, as well as mental recovery. Because you're waking up, you're starting your day off that way. At the same post practice, getting in those quick meals, just nice nutritional meals on top of it, added water. Your body can only absorb 8 ounces every 20 minutes of water. So the next kind of phase into this, and it kind of leads to this a lot of times, is everybody sees the numbers and they see the graph on that periodization chart and they're like, well, why in the world is periodization planning? Well, number one, periodization planning is important because it maximizes your performance. The bottom line, it maximizes your performance. There's a progressive overload. Basically, you are controlling the load that you're putting on at different phases of your training program. It's also going to improve. It's going to help your body, your mental, every aspect of wrestling improve. So that way you can have peak performance. That's why those are highlighted in red right there, because it's in this progressive overload. It's going to be a controlled improvement to get peak performance. It also specificity. Sorry, I can't say it, but it allows the shift in focus, right, towards your exact sport and exact technique that you're wanting to do for competition, and it specifies your drills and the skills that you need to work on. And that's why I asked you a couple slides ago, what are we working on? What's our strengths? What are our weaknesses? Because we need to start narrowing that down and make it very specific for your match plan. So that way, when you get peak performance, right when it matters most. The other thing is when you're maximizing performance, you're reducing your overtraining or injury. And we see this all the time. We see this all the time. We see it in our national championships quite a bit, where teams just overtrain and the same teams come in beat up, broken down, and they're not at their peak performance because they've just overtrained. And they've got an injury or they've got something they're trying to overcome. And that's exactly what periodization planning does, is it prevents the body from becoming overwhelmed, and it reduces the risk of injury, right? And so then throughout your whole process, if you're doing things right, you're recovering right, just like in this phase right here, we're in the base, we're doing a lot of volume, just that light little run or nice walk in the morning with a nice little yoga stretch or hot yoga stretch, something like that will get the lactic acid spread out. That's going to help you prevent injury a little bit more. Number two, so we got maximized performance is one. Number two, it maintains motivation, right? It prevents that burnout. Variety, obviously it comes right into the middle of your plan. You've got to have a strategic plan. But this also, it combats that boredom or the burnout of just sitting there and hitting a million high crotches and a million, double legs. And this is over and over. And now we just identified as parterre defense as one of our weaknesses. Well, if that's all we're working on is the primary thing that we're working on in practice is parterre defense, you've got to have different a variety and a challenge, so that way you don't just come in and go through the motions, right? You've got to have that plan. Mental preparation, it also changes with that because each phase has a mental preparation piece in this. And right now, if you're doing your active recovery and you're doing the stretching and the water logs and those things during this first phase, it's going to help you mentally focus. And at the same time, coaches, we can change this a little bit as we see this. This is where we can change our mental preparation, and that it also manages this mental pressure. If we start working on parterre defense and we know our game plan, we have a game plan for when we get put down on bottom or when we get taken down, and we're already mentally prepared for that, and we have a game plan and an attack with that, we're going to roll right through it, and we're going to be fine, and we're going to have a higher success rate. And that's where coaches can really drive these things home through their practice. It's just keeping that mental focus. The third reason and why periodization planning is important, because it benefits everybody, right? So it's a long-term gains. Everything is planned, everything is organized, everything is structured. There's a reason why we do what we do during a certain time. We had a group come together with this to create this periodization plan. And it promotes the sustainable training, right? And it prioritizes the recovery and preventing injuries. By doing this way, you have a game plan where you are successfully becoming better as an athlete and as a coach. But at the same point in time, you're getting ready to peak at the optimal time. The other thing is, if you're a development coach on here and maybe you don't have a high performance athlete at this point in time just quite yet, but you're working towards that, this is applicable to all levels. And so this is definitely, it can be worked all the way through. And maybe you're trying to get them to the high performance status. And this is definitely a benefit for you, just to have a game plan, have a periodization plan of what that looks like. Any questions with this so far?
No questions, Marty. Thank you very much. A very informative thing about periodization. I just wanted to ask those people who are on the call right now, just if they have ever used or knew about the periodization and like what their thoughts about this thing. I can see there are three coaches besides me. Would be great to hear something from them.
So Coach Andrew Estrada here.
Yep.
I've learned about it over the years. I haven't been fortunate enough to have a high performance athlete to actually apply it, but I've been very conscious of it regardless when it comes to structuring my lesson plans, and just using it as a tool to sort of keep consistency and try and avoid injuries. So I've used it mainly as a framework for avoiding injuries and keeping intensity up. I haven't personally been able to use it for competition and like getting them to national or international competitions, but I look forward to that one day.
Sure, and you can use this, and we can design one to get to that performance. to get to that high performance, right? What does that look like? And maybe that's a long-term thing, and we can discuss that at another time. But this is definitely a piece of that as well, right? To get them to that, to keep that interest, so that way they don't have that burnout and they get to that level. And that's exciting, right? That's super exciting. Anybody else?
Yeah, this is Coach Butler out here in WA. Just the club I work with has very little, I'll say, long-term development of wrestlers. It's a club where they're training to train, and not yet at a level where they're training to compete, with the exception of one or two. And with those one and two, the periodization approach is what we've been using on the side when they come in, because we have a high rate of fly in, fly out participants, and we're trying to keep a consistent program has been a challenge. But yeah, we're using it when we can, and yeah, that's all I got to say about that.
Yeah, awesome. No, that's great, right? And retention is a big piece of this, right? And so that's, yeah. No, I see that. Awesome. Awesome. Anybody else?
Marty, if you could share the chart with our plan, just to see if we are all on the same page and understand the whole thing about the periodization.
Yeah. And so,
yeah, just for your information, I wanted to let you know that we have updated schedule, and our competition moved slightly. So now we have Oceania Championships in February.
okay.
February 6th, 7th. So, like there are some adjustments to the plan.
Sure. Sure.
Just letting you know. Andrew,
Yeah.
Andrew Estrada, if you can, if like, I just wanted to ask you if you understand what you see on the screen. Like, if there are any questions, it's a great opportunity to ask Marty now. If you're struggling with something.
No. I'm pretty across all the terms. I reckon the only things that would change, as you mentioned, the dates. Like, obviously, you'd want to peak at the appropriate date. I don't think we're doing ourselves any favor not having a calendar like set out well in advance. But next year is an Olympic year, so it's much easier to work towards that framework. But yeah, like, more often than not, what the challenge is in New South Wales is we don't have the staple events that we're training towards, and so that becomes a bit of a challenge of it. Whereas when I was younger, it would be a case of, okay, our state championships is always on a March, so we're going to train towards that in March. Whereas now we're kind of a bit all over the place with the calendar. But what's on the screen, very straightforward. I feel.
Yeah, I think I'm going to jump in here a little bit. I think with the change of dates, looking at the 7th of February, I would go in January. It shows week 5, 6, and 7 as 70% volume, 30% intensity. Then we go to 50-50. Obviously, we would shift that. We would run that. I would maybe go a 60-40. So I would go a 70% volume, 30% intensity, weeks 5, 6, 7. Then in weeks 8 and 9, I would maybe go a 60-40%. And then that would lead into that 50-50 on week 10, if that makes sense.
Marty, it would be great if you could explain in a simple language what's volume, what's intensity, because I heard from coaches that they struggle with understanding like how you can make 50% intensity and 50% volume, like how it looks like.
Yeah, no, that's great. Okay, so I'm going to come through a couple more slides here. I'm going to go a little bit forward. So 3 keys. I'm going to hit this and then I'll come back to that, Andre. I'll come back to that, Coach. So we got 3 keys to periodization planning. Here's the bottom line. This is the reason why we do periodization planning. We got to establish a clear goal. Right now, if you go back to the periodization plan, the clear goal is in green. That's the goal. And that's the Olympic Games qualifier. That's to qualify for the Olympics. So we've got a clear goal. Second thing is structured training cycles. You can see throughout that, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about the volume and intensity and those things here in just a second. And at the same time, the third biggest key to periodization planning is to manipulate the training variables. So that way it stays fresh, the athletes are good, the technique is good, the match plan is figured out, all of those things are in line. And so this is periodization models. And so I'm going to get into this a little bit. So you see volume on this screen to the left. And there's a little bit more dialogue there down below, but the traditional periodization model, right, is volumes on the left, the top left. You see it's way high at the very beginning, and then it works its way to the bottom right. So as you get to where competition is, it's a little bit less than where it was in the general, where we're at in the base phase. The same point in time, the intensity and the technique at the beginning, we're still trying to figure out what that technique is. And then we're working up as we get going during competition. The intensity is the highest because you are intense. You're trying to make the world team. You're trying to make the Olympic Games, whatever that peak is, right? Whatever your peak is. And so when you get into volume and technique, when we say this, we're not necessarily, when I'm looking at volume, intensity, and technique, let's take, say, a single leg, for instance. Let's say a sweep single. When we get into the sweep single, we are not sweep single volume right now in the base phase where we're at in our periodization plan. That means that an athlete is hitting a high volume. He's hitting 100 to 200 sweep singles every practice. His volume, his repetition is extremely, extremely high. His intensity, when I say intensity, that means that his opponent or his partner is going live against him and defending it, is not as high. As you can see, it's the general phase, it's to the left. The intensity is way down. At the same point in time, the technical side of things, as a coach, yes, am I looking to see if his technique is correct? Yes. But am I fine-tuning it and am I teaching the technique at that point? No. This should be something that, hey, this is going to be in his match plan. He's going to hit a sweep single. We know this is his go-to. We know this is his attack. So he's going to hit the sweep single 5 million times between the next 3 weeks. And then the volume is huge there. But his partner is not going live. His partner, it's not a live defensive side. We're making sure he gets in the repetition of getting that right. His technique, maybe for a week, I'm worried about just his head position. Hey, you're going to hit 200 repetitions every day of a sweep single, and I'm worried about your head position. Is it up or is it down? And then the next week, hey, where are your hands? Are they locked? Are they separated? Are they on the joint? Are they on the thigh? Where are they at? And then the next week, I can worry about, okay, where's your foot position? Are we behind? Is your shoulder behind the leg or is it to the side of the leg? And so that's where I hope this answers your question, Andre, a little bit. As far as volume, intensity, and technique, that's where we're looking at. When we're looking at volume in this first phase, we're looking at getting a ton of repetitions. The intensity is not necessarily live where the partner is going live. I am going live if I'm the wrestler. And then the technique side, I'm just worried about one piece of the technique of the sweep single right now in the general phase. As we get going and we get into the specialized or we get into the pre-competition phase, now all of a sudden technique, I'm worried way more about it, but I'm also doing less reps. So I can focus a little bit more. The intensity at the same point in time, now the intensity is picking up. So now my partner is maybe resisting more. So now I have to clear, which allows me to work on the technique of clearing the tie to get to the shot. And then once we get to competition phase, obviously, that's when the intensity is the most extreme and the volume. I mean, you might get 2 to 3 sweep singles in a match. I mean, especially at the high performance side, if you're getting it multiple times, that either means you're really good or the opponent's really bad, one or the other. I mean, you don't see a ton of the same technique working over and over because somebody's going to shut that down defensively. You know, once you beat them once, twice at the most, by the third time, they've shut that down. They've started working on that defense to that. They've already corrected that. But does that help answer that, Coach?
Yeah, definitely. Marty, just another practical question about periodization. We have a national seniors national championships in June. So if you could explain how you would identify those phases, how you put them in terms of timing, like when is the general phase starts, like how many weeks, months is whatever,
Yeah.
for coaches to understand, like to how it works.
Okay. Yeah. So we go right to this plan. So let's just look at and you can shift these accordingly. Let's look at this right now temporarily for the for the Olympic Games qualifier in March. So we start in December. So we go back 3 months. We can go 4 months. We can go through this. You can make this 5 months. If you're looking at June as the qualifying, right, or as the nationals, then June would be where March is. You could come back, May, April, March. So you can, does that make sense? You can switch these months accordingly. At the same time, you can adjust these percentages. So when you go down to the level, if you go down to the 6th block on the left, you see level. And as you go across, that's going to change accordingly. When you are peaking, when you want your highest, your peak performance, right? Your intensity is going to be high. The volume is going to be low, exactly what we said. Now we have that in the yellow, we have that mini peak, and we have that mini peak area there because that's a test. Like that's kind of our first test, like a quiz, if you would say in school. Like that's just a quiz to see, hey, is this working? Is this not working? Are we right on task? Do we need to up the volume or do we need to up the intensity to actually see if the technique's working or not? That's where that is. That's where that mini peak is. But at the end goal, if you're national, if you're trying to make the national team and that's in June, that would be where the March is. Then this obviously would go back, right, to right at the end of this, which would be March. If you're trying to do that now, you can add months to this, but realize when you add months to this, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that, but you're going to have to vary the difference of volume and intensity. And you can't go straight from 80% volume, 20% intensity to 50-50. That's not how that's going to work. And that's what I was just saying. I would switch because the dates of the Oceanic Games changed. I would shift this yellow column that's in week 8 to week 10. I would slide 9 and 10. That's the post competition. That's your recovery, your refocus, your readjust, all of those things with the match plan, with the recovery phase. I would switch that just a little bit, if that makes sense. So I would go the first 4 weeks, 80-20, 80% volume, 20% intensity. Then I would go the next 3 weeks, 70-30. Then I would go the next 2 weeks, weeks 8 and 9, I would go 60-40. And then week 10, which is when the games are, would be 50-50. So then now I would readjust what in this picture shows weeks 9 and 10, the 70-30, and then the 60-40, the refocus, readjust. You're at home, it's post competition, all of those things. I would switch those to week 11 and 12 because that's your post competition. And it's going to be a tighter window now for your competition prep cycle, if that makes sense. So if you're, I don't know if that answers that for as far as June, but basically I would readjust these months to match accordingly because periodization plans change and they're very fluid, and you'll see this as we get going. Because here's the bottom line. If you can see the screen now, recovering and overtraining, this comes to communication, and this comes to the periodization planning. And this also comes to exactly what Andre was saying. If you're trying to train for the nationals and you got an Olympic game qualifier in March, you qualify for the Olympics in March. Well, now you need to restart your cycle. Like you need to have a new periodization plan for the next time you want to peak. You're not going to be able to peak multiple times in one plan. And so you've got to plan accordingly. This is on the far left. That's your current fitness level. Obviously, anytime you train and then you recover, you want to have a higher fitness level, and that's on the far right, and that's the gain, and it shows that the gain, but you have to have the training and you have to have the recovery. So how much you break down during training, you're going to have to recover, and that's where the how long on the bottom of this graph, how long does the recovery cycle need to be, or that phase needs to be, and it depends on how much you broke it down during training. And so if you go from the Olympic Games in March, the Olympic game qualifier, to nationals in June. Now you're going to have to come up with a new cycle. Otherwise, what's going to happen is, let me go through a couple of these slides here, and I'll show you what's going to happen because I show it here later. You're going to have this, where you're going to keep training and you're going to keep breaking it down, and you're not recovering. You're not allowing enough recovery to get back where you need to be. So that's where the overtraining can be. If you're not allowing that recovery between the Olympic game qualifier and the national competition. Did that answer that, or was that equivalent, or do I need to break it down a little bit more? Are we good?
No, that's great. Unless other coaches have questions about this. Marty, just in regard to this topic, any chance you can share these slides with us? And if you can recommend any additional resources on this topic, it would be very good. So coaches can learn in their own pace.
Yes, for sure. I've got several of those. I'll share these slides. Coaches, if you want to email me, I'll throw my email in the chat here at the end. I'll make sure you have all my contact, my phone number, everything that you need. After last month's call, or last week's call, 2 weeks call would go. Last call, I had several coaches reach out. I will share all these slides with anybody who reaches out to me. Some of the biggest things in coaching is communication mistakes. I'm going to kind of keep going here. I've got a lot of resources on periodization planning, especially at the developmental age, because that's a huge piece of this, right? But communication mistakes, one of them, lack of clarity and specificity. Like, you got to be very specific. The coach, don't use the vague language. You don't need to say, hey, you need to be more aggressive. Okay. When you're facing your opponent, keep your hands up, give them a specific task. Don't just say, hey, you need to be more aggressive. Tell them, hey, attack the attack hand. Right? Keep your hands up, keep your feet moving, take their space, right? Open up your attack that way. The other thing is, number 2, one-sided communication. Athlete, you're not just listening. Athlete, you've got to be engaged in this conversation. You're the piece. We're trying to move you from point A to point B. Going back to that first slide in this. Don't give a long, coach, if you're a coach, don't give a long monologue, and don't ask any questions. You need to get that feedback. And then you got to practice the plan. The athletes say, hey, no, coach, I feel, my underhook is my setup. Okay, great. Let's practice that and let's get working in that plan. So that way we can see, and both parties can say, hey, this is correct. And this is the best for this athlete. The third thing, don't ignore your emotions. Communication. It's not just about the technical side of things, right? You've got to address the athlete's emotions. And the coach, you definitely got to see what the athlete's feeling. The athlete, if they really feel that the 2-on-1 is their go-to and not the underhook, okay, then that's an emotional piece. Maybe you see it statistically, or maybe you see it from a different light. You can't just throw away their emotions and where they're at, because don't bottle it up is basically what I'm saying. Don't bottle it up. They've got concerns, and you've got to communicate those. And the other thing is, you got to listen. As coach, this is in the 201 course. And when you're studying periodization planning, if you're a coach that maybe doesn't have a high performance athlete yet, or you're working towards that, or maybe you got athletes that are competing a little bit, get in this 201 course. This 201 course is going to teach you a ton. And I think that, like right here, just listening, paying attention, all of these things, the nonverbal cues, what's their body language saying? Those are big things. And one of the questions I had for the athletes was just, what are the athletes saying to the coaches? What are they telling themselves right now? What are the changes that the coaches are saying? Have they started changing their aspects since last call? Right? Like, is there anything that's changed? I guess so. Let's kind of ask that. Have you seen any major changes in anything, Andre, from the athletes, like what they're saying? Because I know you've been on calls with them. Are they starting to say things? Are they starting to interpret this periodization plan? Are they doing the 80% volume, 20% intensity? And has that changed anything as far as what they're saying with you?
I can tell that there is a problem with understanding of the concept, but we are currently in the phase where I have to explain, coaches have to explain, but we're trying to get there. We're still in the phase where there's a little confusion, but yeah, we're following the concept.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, no, and I think that's the biggest thing, right? I think coaches have to be receptive to the listening and learning what their coaches or what their athletes are saying and what they're feeling. And at the same point in time, the coaches also need to make sure that they understand what the volume and the intensity need to be and what that looks like. And they need to hop on this call. So I know we're going to send this out. So those coaches that maybe weren't on the call live, let's make sure that the next call that's on January 8th, well, it'll be January 9th in Australian time. Make sure that we get on this call so we can have this dialect and we can answer the questions. That's the biggest piece is communication, not just between the athlete and the coach, but also if you're trying to follow a periodization plan and you don't understand it, then definitely hop on the call live or get with me, call me, text me, email, whatever, and let's see and let's engage. So the more that we know, the more that we can help you. And help this committee come up with the best plan that's for you, because it's not going to always stay static. Risk management, this goes a big piece with this. And this is kind of the biggest concern that actually, if someone's not understanding something, then risk management comes up. And this is in that 201 course as well. But it's the process of decision making and implementation. So it's to minimize injuries and loss, right? Like, and you don't want to get hurt. And what's the risk? You got to identify the risk. You got to reduce the risk as a coach. And also, what's the planning for reducing the risk and monitoring it, right? It's the same thing for the athletes. When you walk in and you've got 7 people that show up and it's a quote unquote beginner's class and they're different weights, what's going to go on? How are you going to be able to effectively train get your optimal performance for your periodization plan, right? And at the same time, stay injury free for everyone in the room, not just you, but for everyone in the room. So that way they show up next time. Some of these things that you got to consider: what's the appropriate pairing? Not just the weight, the experience, there's age, there's physical capabilities. Also, how many people are on the mat? How many people are in the room? How many people should be on the mat? If we're doing throws, there should be less people on that mat if we're doing a ton of throws in the high rep volume. If you're doing a ton of arm throws, arm spins, head and arms, salto throws, over unders, lat drops, lateral drops, all of those things. And what's the movement of the coach within the room? Is the coach moving in the room? Are they able to direct the actions accordingly to keep everybody safe? Because this is part of that risk management. These are all things that come into play. And especially this slide goes really more to those coaches that are maybe not in a high performance room all the time. Maybe they have athletes that are just learning or they're just training. Coach, I know Coach Butler, you're just saying, they fly in, they fly out. Right. And this is one of those scenarios where you've got to be more active in the room. Where are your actions at? What's the movement of you so you can best see and keep the room safe? So that way it helps with that retention and that, hey, wait a minute, I can do this. It builds confidence. And then maybe they want to go train, or they just keep coming in and they don't necessarily fly out as much. If you're just keeping that in there, if they've got appropriate space or the drills ran right. And that was just one of those things that I heard that I don't mean to pick on you, but at the same time, it was one of those things that was one of those scenarios that when you said it earlier, I'm like, man, this is great. One of those retention aspects is definitely just making sure that they feel safe on the mat and the positioning of the mat. And I knew that this slide was coming, so that's why I wanted to go back and hit it. We talked about this, the recovery and overtraining piece. Just make sure that recovery is vital. As you get more into the pre-competition phase, obviously you're going to be taking in your pre-competition phase. You're also going to be doing a little bit more weight management at that point in time. So at the same time, your water retention and your hydration levels are going to be a little bit different. They're going to be coming down, which is going to affect how quickly you recover. The more water you put into your body, obviously, the quicker it's going to recover. And the lower amount of water that you're putting in, the slower your body's going to recover, because it's not going to have those things to recover as well. Some of the signs of overtraining. I've listed them here to the right. Sore muscles continuous. Right now you're in high volume, so you're going to be a little sore. That's why you're going to run and get the lactic acid out. Those things, you're going to reduce your immune system a little bit if you're overtraining. That's when you're going to all of a sudden you get sick, right? You can't sleep as much. Maybe you're elevated, you got a little insomnia. Those things, all of those are going to come in. You're irritable, right? All of these things, the decreased motivation, that's where periodization plan and the varying of those things help out quite a bit. And so some of the, to help reduce the risk of overtraining, obviously follow the periodization plan, get in longer recovery times for high intensity, high volume workouts if you're doing both, and should be a variety. Obviously comes back to communication, listen to the athletes and accommodate them, talk to them a little bit. Make sure that your recovery and overtraining is in line with your match plan. So if you're hitting a ton of throws, arm spins, arm throws, but that's maybe not necessarily in your match plan, then, you know, we need to adjust that accordingly. Make sure that that's in line and syncing together. Obviously, I'll come to this. We're getting towards the end of this presentation, but here's your match plan. I've shared this several times. I'll share it with anybody and everybody. This is something that we put in with our 6-year-olds with our club here that I run. Our 6-year-olds instantly know whether they're competing or not. They know their game plan. They know their first tie. They know their first contact. They know how they're going to score first. What's the first finish? What's their second finish? And these are pieces that we just kind of work on. If you see, you know, down towards the bottom of the screen where it says takedown to turn top series, what's your first setup? Are you going leg lace? Are you going gut? Are you going lift? Are you going gut to lift? Are you going lift to gut? Are you going lace to gut? Are you going gut to lace? There's a lot of variations there. But we start working on that instantly right now with our 6, 7, 8-year-olds. We're having these discussions of, hey, what do you like to do? Do you like to do a gut wrench? Do you like to do a leg lace? And even with our 6-year-olds, we're asking them, do you know what a leg lace is? Do you know what a gut wrench is? As simple as that. And then we go all the way into our high performance athletes where they're talking, hey, I love a reverse lift. They're not just talking about a lift. They're saying, hey, I love a reverse lift to a Turk, right? So it can go to whatever level you want. But I would start at the top. What's your first contact, right? What is your first contact? Is it a lot of kids go straight, especially when I was down in Australia, I saw a lot of kids go to a collar tie. And when they reach for that collar tie, we've got to look at what are they exposing, but also that is a pulling motion. So is their takedown, is it coming from a pulling motion or is it coming from a pushing motion? Because when your hand is facing your face, when your palm is facing your face, that is a pulling motion. And a lot of them were doing that, but they were trying to hit, you know, a double leg. They were trying to hit that pop and go. Well, now you're doing a pulling motion with a pushing action. And so you're fighting yourself, is what I'm trying to say. So, but just have a plan, have a game plan. This is the match plan that I shared with several people. And then we go to this. Does the plan still make sense? So now I'll kind of sum that up. Obviously, you're going to remember 10% of what you read, 20 of what you hear, kind of all the way down, 90% of what you actually do. And so now I'm going to go in. Do you have any questions over periodization planning, anything that we've talked about, anything at any level? I am more than willing to just listen. If you've got questions, if you've got thoughts, if there's anything I can help you with on my end, go at it. I'm going to listen.
Well, Marty, the challenge for me is that, you know, besides having inconsistent attendance, is a range of ages as well in the club setting. And not most of the wrestlers that, I would say most of the wrestlers that are our junior wrestlers that come through the door, it's because the parents are trying to get them into the program and not necessarily their particular primary interests. So there's a challenge, you know, these clubs with consistency trying to get a program and plan together when you don't know who's walking through the door week to week. That's been one of the biggest challenges of trying to incorporate something as formal as a periodization approach into a club which is more focused on training and introducing wrestling to the world instead of competing at that high level. We get some guys that compete at that high level, but those are the ones that are onesies and twosies that are committed and can attend more than their fellow colleagues or club members.
Sure. So I guess let me ask you this: what's the win-win? What's the win for the kid coming in? That one of the wins right away that you just said is they're going to make mom and dad happy because mom and dad want to get them involved. So what's the win? The win for you is having more kids in the room and having them show up on a regular basis, right? Like we know that's the win for you and for the club because this kid is showing up on a regular basis. But what is the win for the kid? I guess is what I'm asking.
Yeah, well, I think the win for the kid is that increase their skills and have fun. I mean, a lot of the younger ones are there to simply have fun and socialize in a club setting. Now, out of that crop of youngsters, onesies and twosies will pop up as rising stars, and that's when you build this program around.
Exactly. That's exactly it. And they got to want to be there, right? So how do you make it fun for them because they want to do it if it's fun. If it's not fun, then they're not going to want to come do it, right? And so if they're learning, I think most humans love learning, and they love that, and they love games, right? But we've got to make sure that it's it's a sport, it's what we do, it's not who we are. And so I think that's it. I think one of the things that maybe it'll help challenge, I don't know, I'm interested to see our dialogue as we continue to grow, Coach Butler, and between you and I and our relationship is, man, how do you make it fun? Like our little ninjas, this week it was Christmas. So all we did was Christmas games. And so we did hip heist, we did bridges, we did all that stuff, but we turned it into Christmas elf games. And they had to be elf on the shelf. And hey, what's that look like? And, and so we made it into quote unquote Christmas games in their minds. But in reality for us, it was, hip heist. It was bridge walks. It was building their neck strength. It was building all of those wrestling foundations, stance and motion. Well, at the same time, okay, you got elf shoes. That's what we told them. You got elf shoes. Okay, elf shoes dance, go dance. Let's see stance and motion. Boom. Okay, wait a minute. And so those were things and ideas that we did, but for them, it made it fun. And so I think they're going to show up again. Right. So I don't know what else. Yeah. I think, Bud, I think you're trying to talk. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I'm having my speakers jumping around, so sound's been coming on and off, but I'm good now.
Awesome. Do you have a question or a thought?
Marty, you talking to me?
Oh, no, I was talking to Bud. I thought Bud had a question.
Okay.
No? Okay. Anybody else? Anything else with periodization planning? Because that's it. I think you can't halfway do a periodization plan. I mean, you got to go through it, right? And so maybe the plan is, how do we get them? Maybe that's the periodization plan is, how do you get them to show up every day consistently or every week, right? Maybe don't shoot for the thing. Like, with our program, 7 years ago, we started with 26. Now we got over 400 in our program. And it's one of those things that 26 didn't become 100 right away. It was one of those 26 showed up every day and they enjoyed it. And then all of a sudden they became 50. And then those 50 became 100 and 100 became 200 and 200 became 400 because they wanted it. They were the selling point. It was a win-win for them. We didn't just go out and get 100 people and bring them in. That's not how that worked. It was, it was more word of mouth and more of them going out, and parents, like you said, parents want their kids to do well. And so I don't know.
I just want to weigh in for a sec. Because of this notion, I've gone through the experience of you need to have that goal and that end in mind. What are we trying to achieve? I've been in in a club where the kids' class wasn't really meshing. And it all came from like the foundation of why we're here, actually having conversation with kids. I know it sounds stupid, but as you mentioned before, Coach, communication is imperative. Some of these kids are pretty aware of what they like, what they enjoy, and just building off that. I feel like then having those smart objectives, making it measurable. So today I had 10 in class. Let's say, how are we going to get to 15 and so on and so forth. I think my proudest thing as a coach in the last 6 months was my wrestling class overtaking a no-gi jiu-jitsu class in the same club. So having those goals, I'm not here to slander other sports, but just having that was a pretty cool objective to have. And then to be able to achieve it, what's next? Let's get a competitive team. So that's my goal for next year with my kids. But once again, what's the win-win? And having that end in mind, the 7 things of being an effective human being.
Sure. And that's a piece of this. So I highly encourage you, if you haven't taken the 201 course at Coach Estrada, definitely do it, because that's a piece of that. How do you retain these athletes to where if you want to become that high performance coach, then these are all pieces of it, right? Like you continue and you're showing and you're leading by example. Hey, I'm doing this to continue myself because I'm a student just like you. And the athletes see that. You don't have to tell them that. They automatically see that, and then they're like, wait a minute, he's doing this. Okay, I need to be doing this, because they want to mimic you, because you're the hero, you're the coach, you're the lead, right? You're the leader, and they want to do that, and so they see that. And so I think that's great stuff. But at the same time, you can come up with a periodization plan if you want to create that high performance athlete or club or team. How does that happen? And we need to start coming up with that plan, like start getting that rough sketch together. What's it look like? What does, right now it's December. Okay, what does March look like? It's the Olympic game qualifier. Maybe you don't have anybody that's going to be at the Olympic game qualifier, but that's where you want to be. So are you watching that with your athletes? Are you, is that a step? Is that a piece of your periodization plan for the next year or the next 2 years? Or what does that look like? Right. But these are things that you can definitely continue to work on. And I'd be happy to help with anything, or just listen. I'd love to learn what your thoughts are, right? And learn from you. And that's what I'm doing here. I've got a ton of notes. I'm taking a page of notes, and that's why I want you guys to talk more. So I'm going to shut up. What else? Any other thoughts with periodization or with our plan, or with where you guys are at, or what the athletes are doing? Andre, do you have anything, or Kyle, do you guys have anything? I know I've taken up an hour of your time.
I think that you covered more than enough. I don't have questions. Thank you very much for this session. And if you can tell us what should we expect for the next one on January 8th, January 9th, actually.
Yeah. So as I say, it'll be January 9th. So next one, we're going to talk about camp, the technical work. We're going to get into an updated of match plan. Like what? So I would like to see some of the athletes on there, and I'm going to reach out to some of them that have been emailing me. But the next one, January 9th for you guys, is it's going to go over our camp, the technical work, the coaches' preparation for a camp. So if you're hosting a camp, what should you be preparing for? What should those things look like? And these are primarily focused for our February development camp. I've also put in into the chat. I'm typing that right now. My phone number, my email, all of those things. If you guys want, it's got 2 different emails in there. If you've got questions for me, if you've got, if you want this presentation, if you want last month's presentation, or I guess it was 2 weeks. It wasn't last month's, but 2 weeks ago's presentation, or this one, I will be more than happy to share any of these slides. And at the same point in time, like I said, next time, January 9th, same time, we'll talk about camp, what the technical pieces that we need to work on. I know Andre hit one of them, was parterre defense. So we're definitely going to hit that next time. And then, obviously kind of go over a match plan. Hopefully some of you have worked with some athletes and you're like, wait a minute, my 6-year-old is working on this. What's this look like, coach? And I want a little bit, I would like to have more interaction from you guys as coaches, of what you're seeing and what you're trying. So go try some of this, and then January 8th we can get back together after Christmas break, and everybody has a good Christmas. So that's what I have. If there's anything else, I'll stay on for a minute if you guys have questions or thoughts. Otherwise, have a Merry Christmas. I appreciate you guys' time, what you do. I know it's a hard job, and I truly appreciate